Tarik Talk. Your host, Tarik Mendez, takes you on a journey with guests from all around the world. Broadcasting around the world. Around the world. This is Tarik Talk.
All right, guys. Today we are here with Yiding Yang. Thank you. Did I get it right?
That's right. There we go.
Yeah. Oh, okay, perfect. I was so nervous. Okay. Thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure. I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you for being here. How are you today?
I'm doing really well. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, and I have to say, for the people that's going to be not only listening to this podcast but watching the podcast, you have a beautiful hanfu.
Yeah.
It looks like, I don't know how to describe it, but the embroidery and the stitching is so flawless and so beautiful. So make sure to tune into the video part as well. Do you want to start off with telling us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. So I'm actually an engineer by training. The reason that Tarik, I assume, has me on his podcast is I would consider myself an art patron and a small-time collector. I remember it was almost a year ago where I had no interest in art. Mm-hmm. It was about the summer of 2022 where I went to my first art fair in Brooklyn. It was called The Other Art Fair.
Oh, wow.
That's the name. And then I think we met at Art Fair 14C.
Shout out to Art Fair 14C.
And at the time, we were volunteers.
Yeah.
And I just remember when I met you, I didn't realize you were one of the artists. And we have a funny story about that. There was a picture. We had a cat wall. Do you remember the cat wall? And were we hanging it up or taking it down? I can't remember.
I think we were hanging it up.
We were hanging it up. There was one piece from Tarik that was just on the bottom of that wall. And I remember looking at it and just saying out loud, "Hey, I think that one's probably my favorite one." And it wasn't. I wasn't made aware that Tarik had pieces at the show. And what attracted me to that piece specifically was the texture. It was the bubble wrap, like dried off texture that I really liked, and then I remember turning to you, and you thought that I was just messing around.
Yeah, because the funny thing was when we were hanging up all the paintings with the curator, I think it was Liz, if I remember correctly. Yeah, well, shout out to Liz for now.
Yeah.
But sorry, excuse me for my coughing. No, what I thought was interesting, because there was probably like almost 200 paintings there, right? That we were going through and sorting, trying to figure out like many various different sizes. And I remember asking you about, I was like, oh, what do you think of this painting? And then you had what I thought was so interesting was like your artistic point of view as a viewer. Like you were saying certain things and comparing to like different contemporary artists. And I said, oh my God, like you have such an interesting point of view that I never thought about, like many things you said. I was like, you're totally right. I never thought about it like this. So then when the wall was like 80% finished and I saw my painting hanging like on the bottom, I wanted to like ask you, because I knew you didn't know which one, like if you had a painting there. So I remember asking you, I said, oh, what's your favorite painting on the wall? And you just like clearly said, oh, I like that one. And you pointed to my painting. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's so funny. It's like, cool. So you already know that's mine. You saw like the description. And I remember you're like, I did it. And I was like, are you serious? And we had like such a funny moment, because I was like, there's no way in the universe, like out of like 200 paintings, you're going to pick the smallest painting that was there, probably like 16 by 20.
Yeah.
Sorry for my coughing, guys. And I remember like you choosing and us running to like tell like Josue was there, and we're like, oh my gosh, the funniest things just happened. So that's why I was like, this is like, I felt honored because you have such a good awareness of the art market and art in general. And I was like, you chose my painting, and I was like, wow.
Absolutely. And I think I thought you were the one who was just trying to be funny.
Yeah.
Because like you said, there were a lot, but I think that one was also very on trend for that year. I think now there's a lot more you can do with texture.
Yeah.
And it's so like contemporary art has gone beyond just the two-dimensional. And not just sculptures, but having a really unique texture on your paintings kind of allows you to stand out a lot more now. So I think what I really liked about that was the texture, and I think it was really on trend for that year because there were so many artworks. I wouldn't just say paintings because paintings imply a two-dimensional flatness, right? But I think what I like to see a lot is just having a variety of texture on a canvas or a panel, anything, because then you're blurring the lines between what is sculpting and what is painting. There was another artist at that fair who, I don't know if you recall, but I remember distinctly his works. What they were on canvas as well, but what he did was crumbling newspaper or some form of paper up and making paper sculptures that stand out from the wall, and that I think took sculpting to from the flat ground to like the wall, and that's what I really like to see.
Oh, that's very fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. And I also, the reason besides like the pain in your art perspective and your art knowledge, what I thought was interesting is in your Instagram. It's like how you're always doing so many different things. Like you're doing like 3D printing sometimes, other art forms, and then I saw you doing, I don't know how to say it correctly in English. Is it welding, like with the little pen, or?
Well, actually, you know, I didn't think of that as art. So I what you're talking about is, I'm just documenting the everyday tasks that I do as a lab assistant.
Oh wow.
So like when I'm at school, what I do is maybe I have to make some parts for a class.
Oh, okay.
But when you look at it closely, I guess if you frame the miniature electronic parts, and you take that and you expand it, it really does look so different, right? I think on my LinkedIn page, I put as my cover, I once opened my laptop, the back of my laptop, to replace a battery, and just seeing all the dust, all the little dust bunnies, all the grime that builds up on the fan, and then seeing the underlying components, it's really inspiring to think about how far technology has come. And I think technology and art is really coming together right now. Yes. And we could talk a little more about that.
Oh, definitely. So let's get into it. But yeah, that's so fascinating because I actually didn't know about the lab assistant part. I just thought, excuse me for my cough once again. And the funniest thing was that you mentioned that little pen thing. What is it called?
They're just
welding. Am I saying it correctly? Soldering. Yes, that's correct. I actually, when I saw the video, it was like you inspired me because actually, when I was like in New York at like an art hardware shop, I saw one of those, but I didn't know exactly what it was for. But I thought, maybe I could use this for future. So I had this thing in my studio for years, but I never knew what to do with it. And then when I saw your story on Instagram, excuse me, I said, oh my gosh, I have one. Let me just like play with it. So I was like doing like, just free stuff, nothing really came out of, but I learned how to use it. So thank you for that. So I was like, oh my gosh, it's like the universe that like us meeting, volunteering the art fair 14C, and then just like getting to know each other briefly. You coming for to my solo show last year. I was like, yeah, you're the perfect guest.
I think when you talk about artists seeing something and then applying it to their own craft, there is obviously a gap between, I guess, what I would call very technical, very functional design, right, and building. So like welders, electricians, or people who are just working to make a living, right? They don't see their work. They might not see their work as an art form. Yes. But they're obviously building things that you could never really just come up with. And I think when that's where you could take a lot of inspiration from, is just how things are made today.
Yeah.
And how that might change how you create, just purely for creative sake, not trying to make something that serves a purpose.
Sorry guys about my cough.
It's okay.
So annoying. Sorry. No, but I totally understand what you mean, because when I was in Hawaii, there was this lady that was like doing weaving hats from like palm trees.
Yes.
And seeing her do it and the colors and everything inspired me a lot. And I think subconsciously, like 2 months after I came back from Hawaii, I started painting a lot of like women with long braids. And then later when I was finished with the painting, I said, oh my gosh, I wonder where this came from. And then like the more I looked to it, I said, oh my God, it was the lady that was doing like those, like, you know, things you see like on Instagram. It's like the cool hats they make you out of leaves and everything. So I totally understand what you mean. It does like almost get it. It's like, I always tell everybody, it's like we all have this like subconscious creative iCloud that you can kind of like dab into and get an idea or another, and then transform that into like a finished product.
I think when you mentioned about going to, you said this was in Hawaii.
Yeah.
It reminds me that a lot of what we think as fine art, I guess, is so limited in terms of its cultural origins, because art is a very personal thing, right? And every person comes from a different culture. So I think people tend to have this idea of painting as like oil paintings from the 1800s, right? But what I love about contemporary so much is there is a revival of getting back to your roots, bringing your own culture to the table and showing the world where you come from and the techniques that, you know, people would never know if it weren't for someone forcing it in front of you. So I think I would love to see a lot more people of color, people of minorities, trying to bring something from their ethnic background, and then mixing it up with the established world that the established art world that already dominates the market right now.
That's as you said, like people when you mentioned you worked in your lab and you do like certain things with like wires and stuff like that, and electricians. I totally agree with what you said, because there is an art form. And I remember I think this was in New York. It's like it's a blue logo, and they give they're like electricity providers, and they'll like fix the box every now and then. And I remember one day I was like, I had a friend come in, and they were a little like behind schedule, so I just like observed I thought it was so beautiful, like the thick colors, like the thick wires, thin wires, they're kind of like woven into each other. It just reminded me like of a Persian carpet in a way. So I kept like looking at the guy like pulling wires and cutting them, and I thought, oh my God, this is like so poetic in a way, because there's so many, like nobody knows what's he doing besides him, right? And it looks so dangerous to like the third person, but to him, he knows exactly what he's doing. And I thought there was so much beauty. And the funny thing was, he's like, oh, do you need to? And it's like, no, I just think it's like so cool what you're doing. Like, I love how you're kind of like weaving everything. And then he gave me like 2 big bags of these, like, I guess it was like leftover material. He was like, normally I just throw this out. And I remember like he like saw me looking at the wires, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. I wonder if he has to like going to use everything. And he gave me like 2 big bags of these like thin little wires and thick wires, and that ended up using like I tried on the painting like to stick out. I didn't like it too much, but then I made sculptural bags, and I used like I braided the wires into handles, into like crossbody into handles.
I've seen your bags. I
have to show you when we do like an art studio visit. But so that's where they came from, and it's so interesting that you I feel like we were brothers in previous life, because you say a lot of things that like takes me back to things either that like I've done or I want to do or I plan on doing in the future. But it's that's why it's so fascinating talking to you.
When you talk about repurposing materials from like I don't even know how to describe that industry, right? Because it's not just one field. It's like it's just making the world go around, right? When I was in my lab, I remember having a student group, and they have this project that they're doing for their senior design project, and it involved this metal called nitinol.
Oh wow!
And what's really special about this metal is it's used in a lot of medical applications. So normally when you bend a wire, right, it stays that way. Like if you have a straight wire, if you bend it past a certain point, you can't really get it to go back straight. What's special about this metal was that you bend it, you deform it, you make it curly, whatever you want to do, and then you just heat it up. And it'll go back to its original shape.
Oh wow!
But the original shape, it's not just a straight line. What you could do is, you could heat it up, force it into a specific shape, and it's like it's similar to memory foam. Oh wow! Right, where this metal is formed into a different shape, and you cool it instantly. It's like you heat it up, you force it into a shape, you cool it with water, and then if you put it into a flat sheet, a flat wire, and then you heat it up again, it'll go back to the shape that you made it into.
Oh wow!
So there's so many, but that's just one example of how something that's used in, I guess, science, right? Something that's more
a different field,
yeah. And there's so many things you could do with a metal like that. If you're a sculptor, if you're making wire sculptures, or just maybe an installation. There's so many things that you could explore.
I'm telling you, that's so funny you said installation, because my cousin, she's in Brazil, she's in São Paulo, and she's like doing her PhD, so she's in the lab, so she just shares, like, that's all she does with my poor little baby cousin. But she's like, always sharing like tubes and like thin tubes. I don't know the exact like specific names for them, but my first thought was like doing an installation of it, right, where I kind of wanted to like paint virus, like the stems, you know what I mean, into the tubes, and kind of like put them against light and create shadow. So that's so funny that you said installation, because I think there's like beauty everywhere, and like hearing you talk, especially like in the lab. Like sometimes anything that's like very unfamiliar for me, or I never done, or I don't know much about, I really find it like fascinating, and I always get very good ideas from it, you know.
And I do want to talk a little bit about AI now that we're talking about like how technology is changing things. Have you like have you used AI, like any AI tools for your own creative stuff, anything?
I haven't used it yet, but I've been like reading about on what I can like attain to use it. This is a project I have going on. Like when I was like a little younger, probably like 6-7 years ago, I was like DJing a lot. Oh, okay. So, and then I stopped. And then I recently found like one of my DJ tapes was in this like perfect shape. So I like was listening to my old demos, and I was like, my gosh, this was like real. So I was like listening to my old demos and painting, and then it made me think like what's in the market now, technology wise, you know, that you can blend, and it's so diverse. So that's so interesting you brought that up. Like, what about you?
I think I'm a very early adopter of a lot of new technology. So when ChatGPT came out, I definitely used it for some personal stuff. But I think when you look at the threat of AI to artists and creatives, I think a lot of people they're afraid of how good it can be at making things. So have you heard of Midjourney?
Midjourney, no, I haven't.
So, okay, I'll show you a little later, but it's essentially there's a lot of AIs now where you could tell it to give you an image or give you a painting. Sorry, I didn't know the name. Yeah, Midjourney is one of the most popular ones. And there's also Stable Diffusion. Oh wow! So when you think about how that could kind of maybe replace some art, it is a little scary.
And replace artists too.
Because but when I think about the type of people that use these services, they're not the same audience as people who are buying directly from an artist. I think what's really cool about this technology is it enables everyone, even if they don't have any skill, or if they can't draw, if they can't paint, or they think they're not good, it enables them to get their own commissioned art that comes from their own mind, right? And I think it's really useful for people to find art for themselves to just decorate their room with.
Like accessible art,
right?
In a way.
It's
very
absolutely, that's the
yeah.
right word, accessible.
Yeah.
It is making it so accessible for everyone, because you can't as an artist, I'm sure that when you price your artwork, you have to consider who's buying, how many people are buying. It's a careful balance, right? Between making it too low, and then you can't pay for anything.
No, absolutely, yeah.
And then making it too high, and then no one
sell.
No.
Yeah, but that's so funny, because my favorite things on TikToks is like when people show, they'll like screen record their screen, and they'll be like, oh, today I made this AI service program, like show me like different characters, whether it's like from Disney, from Marvel, whatever their favorite franchise is, and imagine them like in a different genre, like in a different setting.
Oh yeah.
And it's like so fascinating how like accurate but creative I think it is. Like they'll ask like Batman like 5,000 years from now, and then Batman like 1,000 years ago, and it shows you like, and it's so historically accurate, but so creative and diverse that like it's ideas like I never even think, and I think it's so fascinating, but I also think it's like very scary. Yeah, because it's like that movie iRobot. That's my like subconscious what I always think of in a way. Like, this is amazing, but where could it go if it outsmarts us?
Yeah, I think change is always a little difficult.
Yeah.
But I the way I see it is that it speeds things up for the art market.
Yeah.
If you're an artist and you know that there's a computer who can make your style, right? Just maybe not 100%.
Yeah.
But if it can imitate your style to a degree where it's almost indistinguishable by just the regular person looking at it, then it forces you to really find the loopholes where what can I make that can't be repeated? What can I make that can't be imitated?
Yeah.
And that's always how I think that's just always what creativity has been, is trying to do things new, right? And now you just have this bigger challenge, but the people that come out and still have something to show the world at the end of this like technological revolution, they'll be representative of what the human creativity can do. And that's what that's like the other side of the story is you're gonna have people who might be really good at something, and they might make art that's in a very specific style, but they'll be forced to change and think outside the box, right? And also AI I think it's always being trained on something that already exists. So there's no fear that it'll make something new. But I think artists can really take advantage of it in the sense where you don't have to worry that it'll replace you if you're the one who can create your own AI bot, right? If you master, if you like, I think of the AI that we have right now. It's a little bit like Harry Potter, right? Like, do you get that? And there's a whole like right now, instead of learning how to write code, I think that we're just learning how to talk to computers, which is really fascinating. There's this entirely new skill, which is how do you talk to an AI to give it the results that you want. So maybe we'll be forced to, in the future, be really creative about being very specific and knowing what we want. And I think that'll unlock a lot more doors, because if you're forced to describe what you're thinking about in a very specific way, I think then the possibilities are just endless. So that's I hope to see a lot more. Yeah,
I think you're totally right, because I see like AI not slowly, but kind of like rapidly go into different fields.
Yeah.
And depending on the field, I see like some hesitation on people, like they're not sure, like, you know, whatever their field is, how let's say their demographic will receive it. Like, for example, I remember not too long ago, like, you know, Nicki Minaj, that single, she did like an AI music video for like, instead of doing like a normal lyric video. And it was like amazing. And now I think I forgot the name of the singer, but she did an AI music video. So I always thought about that. I said, you know, I feel like people are going to be able to get really creative and cut and like do things that they would probably have to depend on green screen before, and they might be able to like cut budgets and save money and invest that into AI and go above and beyond. So I think it's pretty interesting. But the only thing that scares me is like great artists like, you know, Michael Jackson, Prince, people that have passed, Whitney Houston, amazing people. I feel it is, I don't know who's handling their state, but if it's in the hands of the wrong person, they could easily, something could be released. Let's say allegedly, right? Something could be released, and what's the guarantee that was like a demo that just got, you know, let's say remastered, and it wasn't something created through AI, you know?
Absolutely.
I think that those are the areas that could be.
Yeah. But I think the desire to have verification is so strong when you see what's possible, and it's like how do you authenticate a piece of something, but maybe it's not so possible with someone like Michael Jackson now. If you bring something up, I think you'll be very skeptical to think that it was him. But with living artists, I think being able to reinforce your original work as your own and distinguishing it from a AI generated piece of work is so important now. But part of what makes people attracted to art isn't always the piece itself. I think a big part of that is always a relationship with the artist. At least if it's a local artist, if you're able to meet them, right? If they haven't gotten world famous yet, I think that connection is going to be absolutely irreplaceable, because you can't have an AI show up to represent your own art
to greet you and talk about like creative process. That's amazing that you say that, because I know. Oh, sorry, I just hit myself with the microphone. I noticed a lot, like in America, people really care about the product, like the final product, the physical product. Where outside of America, people are more interested in the art first, who you are as an artist, where you are in your career, what's your creative process, what your influences, and where do you see yourself like in the next 10 years. Those are always like the conversations that are happening with like the market outside of US, which I find way more entertaining and fun to talk to them about and talk about the art, versus just like, okay, like this is made out of oil acrylic, that's it, that's what people hear, like you know. It's way more, I think, like culturally enriching the conversation to talk about like the whole, you know, A to Z, versus just, oh, there it is. It's almost like you're like in America, you're just like a walking QR code.
That's
that
true.
People just like, you know, give me the answer quick. I need the QR. You know what I mean? Where everywhere else in the world, they want like that whole process. They want to like, you know, they want that like that meaningful, rich conversation.
And I think that has to do with the way that society values something. I think because America is such a symbol of capitalism, it's such a symbol of the free market. You care so much about material products, that the artist sort of gets lost, especially with really high end, I think like multi-million-dollar sales, right? When you get into that market,
To the Christie's auction block, right?
I was just, absolutely, like those auctions. I mean, when you go to see those, when you see an auction, it's so different from talking to an artist directly, right? There's no, obviously it's all a bunch of representatives. It's an auction house selling things in lots. It's and then you've got your bidders who are just on the phone or like online. It's like very mysterious, buyers. But then when you get down to, I guess, a more affordable range, then it's more of a one-on-one connection with the artist, between the buyer and the artist. It's a lot of times you meet them, you meet each other, you build a rapport. You really get to know this person not as just someone who does art. You get to know who they are, why they do what they do, where do they come from, because there's a lot of that. All of those factors build a story, and I think when you're looking into decorating your home and bringing a piece of art into your life, it's not so much how much money is it worth, but rather what kind of stories do I want to collect in my home, and what kind of stories I want to share, right? Because every time someone sees that piece of art, you're gonna have to be the messenger. So I think there's the spectrum of how well you get to know the artist is really it's like a balance. It's an inverse scale in a way, between the local artist and the multi-million auction houses.
And what do you strive when you're collecting a piece? Like, do you, when you're at an art fair? So sorry about my cough, guys. When you're at an art fair and you strike that conversation, are you kind of like more curious about the journey? Like, you'll take a look at the art and you like go back to the, looking to the artist, and you kind of want that, that 101 to later bring back that knowledge to the art and see if it like clicks with you and if you connect to it?
I think first thing that I always think about is, do I like how it looks? Right. On the most basic level, it's something that you look at every day. So there's always so many artists and so many different types of art, so many styles. Some are purely two-dimensional paintings, or they have a certain color theme. They might have sculptures made of some very interesting material or very ornamental styles. I know what I noticed about my existing collection is that they make me feel like I'm a child.
Oh wow.
So I think when you grow out of, I guess, maybe middle school, right, when you're heading into high school, you're heading into college, and then you become an adult, the world loses so much
color.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And so trying to find some of that childhood, trying to find something from your childhood where you had what's that phrase? You didn't have a care
in the world.
World. It's so hard to find when you're just struggling to pay your bills, or you go to work, you come home, or you're out with friends, and you have all these obligations. But as a kid, I remember when you're in daycare or like kindergarten, you had art class, right? You had all this time. You were on the playground. You were writing. You were drawing with chalk. You were using crayons, finger painting. So much of that is not something that you bring when you're an adult. And I think that for me, I'm looking for some very vibrant colors, something that's a little surreal, something that only a child might be able to see. And it's not to say that I don't like the extreme realist artworks that are out there. I think when I step into my home and I'm tired after a long day and I'm on my bed and I look up, I want to see a wall that's
you can connect to in a way.
And it kind of takes, it's a little, I think you want something that's a little fun.
Yeah.
It's a little lighthearted. But you also might want something that you kind of connect to on a cultural level.
Yeah.
So I think that for me, because I'm a small time collector, I'm collecting for myself. I'm not so worried about the resale value that you might think when you think about art collecting. I think some people think of like hundreds of thousands of dollars, right?
Yeah.
They think
go big or go home.
Yeah, they think of the auction houses. They think of like, oh my God, this sold for a record price. But the vast majority of people who do collect art, I don't think have that type of capital where they see it as an investment or as a financial investment.
Yeah.
So for the rest of us who really appreciate it for the aesthetic, I think that you're not so worried about whether this artist will blow up, will go viral in the future. You're worried about the process of this artist. Like, I know when you have your guests, you're always asking for the creative process.
Yeah.
So you care about the process because you want to know how did a piece of art how was a piece of art
birthed in a way. Yeah.
Yes. It's like you're raising a child.
Yeah,
in
exactly.
a sense. And then when you know the background behind it, then you don't just see the surface level. You see every little stroke, you see every layer underneath, and then you step back. So now you've gotten the process, and then you step back and then you look at it again. After knowing the context, after knowing their story, what does this mean to me now?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just it looks pretty.
Yeah.
You know, if it looks pretty, why not?
Yeah.
And sometimes a little more beyond that. Maybe it has a fun little effect.
Yeah.
Maybe it has a really relatable story. But I think for everyone, they approach it differently. And what I always encourage people to do is to just go out and see what's out there. I think for me personally, I just wanted to get into this world and see. My initial motivation was really, why are people paying millions of dollars for some pieces, right? And I think I walked away seeing a very different side of this world. Instead of looking at the Van Goghs or the Andy Warhols, I was looking at like local artists and smaller artists who haven't made the world stage yet, but they still have something that you connect with, that you want to be a part of. Like you want to be a part of this community that is supporting them.
Yeah.
And I think that in the future, I would be really happy to say if I could look back on my life and say that I was able to support these artists during my life because I liked something that they did and I wanted them to become even bigger. So in a sense, it's like you're voting with your dollars. Yeah.
That's beautifully said. And first of all, going back to you said creative process. Thank you for listening to the previous episode. That's so kind of you. And then addressing how you said, like, you know, talking to the artist, seeing the work. Excuse me. Sorry about. I know the cough is so annoying. Sorry. And like, you know, seeing the artist, talking to the artist, seeing the work, it reminded me, you know, like when Dumbledore takes that little memory thing out. It's like, to me, that's like what art is. Like your art is like a piece of you in a way, you know. When you make you're able to like turn it into like a physical product, and then it's almost like that memory goes into the world, you know. So you saying that's what it reminded me of. It's
and it really is a physical, I think, of like everything that you make is really a physical representation of your soul or your spirit, because like we talked about before, culture is a big thing, right? And not only does every culture have their own techniques for making art, but the way that you see the world is so different when you're from different cultures. So something that you make, you might see things from you might see things from one worldview, right? But then someone else comes along and they see your art. They don't have any context, and they might see something completely different. So part of creating is putting your own thoughts and your own emotions into something, and seeing how that translates when it gets interpreted by someone else. And having to either make the decision that you're going to make something so mainstream where it's easy to understand, or you're making something that's very personal to you where they have to have all the context to fully appreciate it. I think that's a very big decision that every artist also makes. And as a collector, you also want to be aware of, is this something that someone made to appeal to the masses, or is it someone that's made something that's very personal to them? And if I take ownership, if I take a part of them, how can I honor that history? How can I pass on this story? Because if it's not something that they're just giving out because it's pretty, then there's an emotional aspect of something that you need to really be respectful of.
That's beautifully said. The thing that I thought was beautiful that you said is not only how you cherish the relationship of the artist and the art that you collect, but also how at the end of the day you know, that's kind of like, I would say, like a main point of your day where you can go home and relax and connect to the art. I think that's like, I never heard anybody say that. That's very beautiful, and that's like a true art lover. It's not just, you know, somebody's just there for aesthetics or Instagram's a selfie, which happens a lot, like 99.9%. But that's beautifully said. And
I think when you talk about Instagram, that's really Instagram is such an interesting platform for art, because I think it's a necessity nowadays, right? If you want to be successful, you have to have an Instagram page. And I think it's just one of the many problems for modern artists. They have to be their own marketer, and they have to take on so many roles, where I think maybe back hundreds, like centuries of years ago, you just made art, someone bought it from you, maybe you had a dealer, right? Marketing was just other people talking about you. But now, if you're posting on Instagram, you have to really be active,
and keep up.
But what's great about Instagram is, I think what's great about maybe Instagram and all types of digital art now is that I think people who might normally not have a fan base, people who might be artistic but they might not be a full-time artist, let's say, like they are able to build a fan base now. And you could be just someone at home with an iPad, and you could make digital art and start building a platform. But if without Instagram, like without the internet, the barrier to entry would have been very high, because you would have had to print it, or you would have had to
network,
make
so
something.
much,
So I think that what's really nice about the internet now is the ability to have some really small artists who might not want to go big, who might be just content with their fan base online. They could continue to make art just as a hobby and still be recognized for it. And I think there's a lot of communities where you could just support someone and they don't have to go and exhibit. They don't have to go to galleries or fairs. Yeah. And I think that's just a really nice aspect of the modern art world.
Yeah. No, that's amazing, because like sometimes when I'm painting, you know, like you have like an out of body experience. Yeah. Like I have like some random thoughts out of like when you go to bed and you think something embarrassing you did like 20 years ago or 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But sometimes I'll think, I'm like, my God, people really were like 200 years ago, like there was no internet. There was just like social like gatherings, network, word of mouth. So you were just like either like doing commissions or somebody came into your household painting. You're like, oh, it was by this artist. So it was like this total like business process that we have nowadays. You know?
Oh yeah, and I think the process was so much more difficult too historically. Not only did you have to find and source your materials, but I think back then you had to mix your own like paint, right? But now, like I have an iPad at home, I have Procreate. I could open up the app and just go, and I could also just download like images online and mess around with that. There's so many tools that we have.
Oh my God, yeah. Like, and some of them look so authentic to like a sketchbook, I would say, like to oil pastels.
Yeah, because they have
the technique, like with the Apple Pencil. It's like sometimes I have to like double look at it, because I'm like, how did they get that art so smooth? Like, how did they do this blending so perfectly well? And then like I'll zoom in with my fingers. I'm like, oh, this is digital art. But for a second, it really does look like authentic, like it's in like a physical on paper.
Yeah, and it saves a lot of. It's really environmentally friendly. I think you save a lot. You don't have to waste so much materials, because if you just want to do something and you want to throw it away at the end, you could just mess around, delete
and
file.
It's just like so satisfying, because you don't have to get up and throw it in a trash can, you know. Like I feel like, and I talked to a lot of previous guests, like when they create something earlier in my career, I used to be the type that used to like get angry and be like, ugh, and throw it in the trash right away. But now I'm just like, no, I'll let it sit. I might use like parts of it. I might paint over it. But the beauty with like, you know, digital art, it's such a clean process. You just delete and it's like you're refreshed. It's like you just had an espresso and you're ready to go again. There's no frustration. You can only go up, you know? Yeah.
And that's the simplifying the process, I think, is such a cool part of how technology advances. Going back to when we were talking about AI, if eventually, you know, you wouldn't have to even draw anything digitally, you could just think, and the way you think might be able to generate some form of art. And now we're just seeing digital art too, right? But what I think might happen in the future, this is my prediction, is that you will eventually be able to design something on a computer in 3D. And I'm not talking about 3D printing, guys. But I'm thinking, what if you just have like a sculpture design, and you're not a Michelangelo, you can't carve marble, but what if you want to just have a sculpture and have a robot that carves out the sculpture for you,
like in your residence? Or
well, I mean, it could, ideally, right, you would do it in your living room. But you know, I work with 3D printers a lot right now. It still has its limitations. It's nowhere near as beautiful as carving from a raw material. But I think what's really cool about it is it offers a glimpse into the future, because anyone with a 3D printer can
do anything.
Right
at your house. Yeah, sneakers, like sculptures, whatever. Like I love watching the videos of people like that. They'll get a drawer and they'll like literally measure everything in the drawer to fit.
Yes,
it's so satisfying. It's like it's endless.
It's similar to just when you're a kid and maybe you first found out about 2D printers, like laser printers and color printers, and maybe and then you first think, wow, I could print like all of my favorite superheroes.
Yeah, like I could print Tarzan from my computer, have it in my bedroom, and hang it up on my wall, like instant.
And even now, I think we just get bogged down so much just by everyday living that we don't really revisit that as an adult. But recently, I've thought about how you could just, as any normal person, can just print their own stickers and decorate their wall, and stickers are just for people who are too lazy to draw their own stuff, you know. But I really hope to see in the future, maybe just you have your own art robot that can make 3D or 2D things, and not just this is not just pixels, but it's like the motions of painting with a brush. That would be really cool to see. Yeah.
That's so funny you touch on that. Excuse me, because Picasso always said never lose your inner child. Like that's what he said. Like towards the end of his career, he's like, the reason I'm so successful now and I have such a vast amount of work is because I like touch my inner child every day. Like, you know, I emotionally, you know, like cater to it and see how I can like bring that onto the canvas. Like as you said, stickers, like, you know, when you walk in New York City, sometimes people give you promo material, and then like certain things will like remind me of my childhood, and I'm like, my gosh, I used to be like such a free thinker, you know. It was just like so spontaneous. It was just like, you know, a cloud could be a car. Well, like there was nothing holding you back. Like when I remember, like when I started this new process, so it all came from a sticker. I got a sticker from a guy who was like promoting something. I like took it out. It was like an experience, like peeling the thing, and it had like that, I don't know the right term for it, but it was like that metal where it's like a rainbow, but it looks like silver.
You know what I'm talking I know about. What you mean.
Yeah, I forget. There's like a specific word. And I remember, my gosh, like I remember like as a kid, like having so many stickers, putting in different places, taking it out, putting it on my face, and like eating my cereal, drawing, having my cartoon. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And then I just started this recently, like finding things from my like that I still have in my parents' house from childhood, and like taking it and bringing it to the studio with me. And in a way, it's almost like muscle memory. Like when I have it in my hand as I'm creating something or around me, I can like touch into that like spontaneous creativity, and it's just like the work is just like so much more vast. Like I'm not focused just like if I'm painting the vase, I'm focused like on the whole living room, and that living room is in a farm, you know, and there's no rules. So really, I think it's very important, as you said, to like, you know, be able to surround yourself by art that you can connect with. Well, of course you gotta have your investments or whatever, but have that connection to it, and I think it's very important.
And what you said about the inner child makes me think of the reason why children could be considered so creative, and part of that is not having been alive long enough to be not brainwashed, but to have all these ideas
by the zombie world, in a way, right?
So when I think maybe when you're able to just live completely free of responsibility, like if it's just your mind without a body, then that's when you just see things through a completely different perspective. Because children, when they're growing up, you don't have to pay rent. You wake up, you eat, you go to sleep. Maybe you have school, but when you're a little kid,
it's enjoyable, it's interactive, even whatever you're doing. But I do recall like having like my first real job and feeling like I was like a zombie, like I was like in Resident Evil.
What did you?
Sorry for my coughing again. I just felt like, I don't know, I felt like I went like like when there's oil spills and you see how it affects like wildlife, and it's so heartbreaking. Like you see a duck cover and they can't like flap their wings, they can't walk, they don't know what to do. That's how I felt like in my first job. And I remember thinking like, my gosh, I haven't like had any creative thoughts for like 6 months. And then thinking like, oh my gosh, everybody's like that. No wonder why everybody's like sad. Like we're being like, waking up at 6, force-fed breakfast, then you get on your commute, then you're fighting with everybody to get to your work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like humans were not meant to live like this. And I'm so glad like 2020 happened in a way, because we were able to all take a pause and like analyze and think like, okay, let's slow down. let's put things in order. You know, I saw a lot of people get, like, people that I never even been friends since, like, childhood, that I never seen them, like, have any interest in art, like, create their own living room paintings because they couldn't find what they wanted. They said, you know what, let me go get some plaster, let me go get a canvas, let me, like, you know what I mean?
What you said about everyone taking a pause during 2020 was so true for me, because I was living with my parents, and, you know, we didn't go anywhere really. You stay home, but then you're forced to forget about the future for a little bit, because it's so uncertain, you can't predict anything. And once you forget about your plans, once you throw all that out the window, then you start to think, what do I do with all this time? Because you don't have the same, your entire world is just different when when you're in quarantine. And I think a lot of people started new hobbies, and that I'm really grateful that people were forced to take that break. And I remember thinking, is this what retirement feels like? Is this what it feels like if you're out of the industry and just living at home? But then you start, once you get past that initial, oh man, I have so much time, then you start thinking of long-term projects.
Like, what am I going to do with this time now?
Right. And then you want to learn new things. You want to build things and make things.
Like that eager to be better, that eager to have an interest in something, instead of just, like, looking busy at work, stretching your lunch break, then looking busy again, preparing yourself for the commute.
Yes.
But as you said, like, having the eager to learn something, like being eager to to have an interest, and having that energy to have an interest, not just like surviving. You know what I mean? Like, not going to, like, work in corporate America for me was always about coming home and mentally preparing myself for the next day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, how can I do this? Is it Friday already? You know what I mean? So I thought it was like a beauty. Like, so many people, depending like on your age demographic, a lot of like people were able to like do things that they always wanted to but never had the time to, or didn't even know they wanted, like, deep within, like taking dance lessons, like cooking, gardening, whatever they could, just to dive their heads in.
That's I did actually try to take some. I did like try to learn how to dance in my bedroom during COVID. It was so many things.
We were so like creatively free, I think, like,
yes,
because it was like, we don't know how long we're gonna be here.
You're
literally
you could
the
die.
options are endless.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It was like life or death at a point. So
absolutely,
why not make the best out of it?
Oh yeah.
Like, I remember like trying to learn how to cook so many things and trying to figure out, because sometimes the grocery store had like crazy hours that wouldn't open, so you had to do what you could. Yes. And then I was like, oh my god, food is like sculpture making in a way.
I really did. I also got into cooking a lot. I think when you there's this spectrum of food as a science, whereas an art. And what I think now is, are you the type of person who follows recipes, or do you just like
very big problem, like a struggle following recipes? Because first I'm bad at math, and then like I get easily distracted, and then I think, I can just, because I love cooking with like what I have, like making something with what I have, or have a vision of it, But I really struggle. It's like being in school for me. It's like doing a math problem. Are you good?
Yeah, I don't like. What I like about recipes is they're easy to follow. They are like just. They're like a science experiment that you should be able to just follow and make the same thing at the end. But I think when you go beyond recipes, you don't see things as just, you don't see food as parts of, you don't just see foods as like part of a recipe. You see each individual ingredient, and you see the relationship between like everything and how it tastes,
like the color, the texture, everything. And
then at that point, you could start making your own art through cooking, because then you get to decide, I'm not going to follow a recipe. I think this amount looks good, this amount weighs good. And I think that's what a lot of that's what a lot of like our parents and grandparents they're used to, is just having that feeling of what's right and how things come together. And I think when you get good enough at art too, I think when you learn, like at first when you're in school, you learn about the color wheel, you learn about mixing colors, like red and blue make green, and then but then you start seeing, like I love watching those videos where they color match with paint, where they take a picture or an object and then they start taking different colors together with
like when they take like a little painting to let's say like the river, and they'll blend in that painting in a way to the horizon. That's really fascinating.
But then when you watch the process, they sometimes use colors that you don't think belongs.
Like it'll be like a blue sky, they'll use like some crazy orange or like a hot pink. You're like, why is it, like, what are you doing with that? That's not at all in the color palette.
But that's really I think a very human process, because ideally you should be able to make the colors with just like a very few foundational ingredients, and I think if any scientists were to try to color match, I think, have you seen those computers where they have at Home Depot, or where they make
the paint? I'm so fascinated by those.
It's always 3 colors, right?
Like drip,
but that's a very it's like a very scientific way of doing it. But when you see a human do it, it's not like they're using 3 colors. They're using like 10 different
majority.
So but that's such an interesting contrast between how
machines
and humans think differently, because you see a color and you think, oh, this needs a little more blue, a little more white,
and you do that double check.
And that's
not just with art, as you mentioned, but also like assembly line. I love watching videos of where they show like when it's like an assembly line of how humans make things in certain steps, like each person has a task, versus a machine, like 2 robot hands, and they simplify it so much, especially with like fences or like certain like bolts or whatever. Like it'll take like 5 humans doing 5 different tasks at different times a day, where the machine will literally have 2 robot, they just like do twist, bend, and they drop it and the product finished. I'm so fascinated by that as well.
And that reduces, like, the whole goal of that is you want to reduce the amount of variation in that assembly. You want to make it as consistent as possible. But that makes sense if you're trying to mass manufacture something. But I think when you look at something that's handcrafted, what you really want is a lot of variation in that one object, because a master would know how to make something so consistent, but yet he's a human, or he or she is a human. So being a human and developing that consistency is part of the art, but that the consistency itself also has very slight variations that will distinguish your one product from another, that just machines would never be able to really intentionally introduce. It's like if you have a machine, you could intentionally let it be a little less accurate. But when you have a human doing something, the human becomes very good and very accurate at it, and then that's where it becomes a habit, and then they can introduce a lot of different factors into their work.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that. So how do you feel about like AI in terms of like affecting art and like its industry?
So I think, like we said, it'll be so much more accessible for the average person who can't normally afford to buy commissioned art. And I think it'll have its own little market in a way. And I think there might be AI art fairs, AI galleries, where you know that everything that you see is just AI generated, and there's absolutely no question about trying to pull a wool over your head. It's AI generated. And I know that I recently saw an AI exhibit at the MoMA.
No way.
Did you? I don't know if you were.
Which one?
It was, I forget which artist it was, but it was a video.
Big screen?
Yeah, it was a giant video,
yeah.
and it was in the lobby, right? It was like when you walk in, that's the first thing that you see.
What did you think of that?
I think it was. I was always thinking about, first of all, that it's always interesting to see a video art. It's always interesting to see video art because either you had to record it with a camera and you had to go out and find something, or you're on your computer and you're going through some program generating objects, and obviously the AI couldn't record it, so it was. It was someone behind the wheel, like on a computer, and it's so interesting that back in maybe early 2000s, people were drawing with MS Paint, and now you have an entire industry where you let a computer do some of the thinking for you, and it's like similar to how video games get more and more realistic. I think the graphics that you see from like those AI generated videos, as they get more and more realistic, people are also going to be able to identify them through some characteristics. Yeah, I think we can't do that now because the videos that we see we're so used to some of the most minimum requirements for having a video. But I hope that people are able to build a discerning eye in the future when it comes to what's real and what's not, and that's so. But going back to the, is that good?
We're good.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
But going back to that one exhibit, I think when people saw that, they knew it wasn't real, right? It's like when it's a computer and when it's not. And you're still going to maintain a lot of the human aspect in the future. I think about chess when we talk about AI because back in the last century, I don't remember when the first chess computer was made, but it was a whole big deal when a computer beat a human, right? Everyone thought that this is like
not possible.
Like it's just the end. Like you're ending an entire sport. Yeah. But now people still play chess. People get better at it because they have computers. And so I think a similar thing might happen where in the beginning you think, oh, this is going to end, like this is going to be the end of an era. Yeah. But I hope to see artists taking advantage of all this technology in them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And then they'll get better at their craft. Yeah. Right.
Like, I totally agree with what you said. Because people need to adapt. Like, that's like I see like a lot of conversations, especially in the Congress right now. People are saying, "Oh my God, this is the end of the human race." No, you need to adapt. Like like the body changes and regenerates itself all the time. We should like be. It's good to have competition. It's good to want to better yourself, think outside the box, and find a new way. And I think that. As we said about like the AI doing paintings, like I'm right now thinking like when it does like marble sculptures and it carves something like a sketch that you do for your house or wherever you want.
Yeah, but so maybe they'll have their own galleries, maybe they'll have their own market, and there will be collectors for those. And I think someone will probably pride themselves in having an entire collection of AI art. But that. Just like how digital art hasn't just like how the digital art market hasn't completely destroyed the physical art market. Yeah. I think AI generated art won't destroy human generated art for a similar reason, which is that art itself it's not about the function, it's not about what it does for your standard of living. It's about how you relate to it, and in the context of a more intelligent AI, I think that the human relationship will stand out as the key distinguishing factor. When you throw out, because when you get rid of the technical details and it's just two people connecting with each other, that's something you can't replace with an AI. So the relationship, going back to the relationship between a collector and an artist, I think it might be really fun to eventually see that an artist's job isn't mainly to create, but rather it's mainly to talk to people and talk about themselves in a way where maybe you're doing more marketing, but instead of spending so much time on creating a piece of art, you're spending a lot more time on connecting with your base.
Absolutely. And like where I have an art studio, the last like 3 months, I would say, I've seen a lot of people that, they do small like 14 by 24 paintings of like, like do plein air painting. I noticed they switched from like the physical oil and acrylic to digital art, where they're sketching on their iPad or using other technology, and they prefer it so much more because, some of them are not full-time artists. Some of them can't afford, they have a family, they can afford, like, oil paint is very expensive, you know what I mean? So in a way and a lot of them say like this is their best work because they're, creatively they're free from everything. All they need is a charger and Wi-Fi and a good like, Apple Pencil, and that's it. And they're like doing things that I never thought they could do, like I didn't know like they could take a style above. So I do think that AI will like, step your game up in a way as an artist, And I feel like there are artists that even with AI you won't be able to duplicate the work because it's so complex, depending on what the medium is,
I think when the more specific that you get with the more specific an artist gets, the less possible it is for AI to replicate it. So for example, if you were to reference something in your art that's that only that's from a very specific time in your childhood, that's from a very specific place that you've not shown anyone, you could try to describe it to an AI model, but it won't have the same impressions that you have. And I think about how people, when they go to art school, they learn about techniques, right? Like drawing techniques, sketching techniques. And in the beginning, they try to be very real. They try to emulate real life.
Yeah.
And I think AI just kind of cuts that away. It takes the place of how realistic do you want me to be? I could be as realistic as you want me to be, right?
Yeah.
But so then it's like, oh well, there's not really a point then to there's not really a point to trying to be realistic if a computer is just gonna do it like that. But it's I think I used to have this very naive idea of why do people still try to paint things if we have cameras? You could have a photograph that replicates something, and it would do so like 100%, accurate. It would be a pixel for pixel replication. But the reason that people want to do something realistic is because of the fact that it's very hard. So when you have an ultra realistic artist and you know that he's doing something with his hands, which is not his hands don't have eyes. His hands only knew how to make motions in the air, and the translation between seeing and translating that into motions, it's basically what AI does already, right?
And effortlessly.
But for a human to do that is very different. So So I think maybe in projects where what you're looking for is purely the final result, obviously you might not care if it's a human who did it, but everything goes through a process, and with that with performative art, art is the process. So the process is always going to be a part of what makes something very cool. Like Van Gogh's Starry Night it was made when he was in his when he was lying in bed and he was sick, and he didn't see the night at all, or maybe not. My history is not that great.
It's okay. We don't judge here.
But it's not the process of like, how did someone overcome that seemingly impossible obstacle? It's part of what makes it really cool and really worthy of your attention. Yeah.
Even like Picasso's blue period, like seeing the blue paintings and then questioning why are they all blue, and then learning about it. I think that's like what is it, the Picasso Museum in Barcelona. It's when you dive in and you see like that relationship of his personal life and how it reflected onto his art.
Yeah.
I think that takes it. I think AI can't recreate that. Where, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
I think I'm very excited about AI. I think AI can take things to the next level we never dreamed of. But as you mentioned, it does miss that relationship, that process.
And I think what an avenue for existing artists who want to be more involved with AI or like use it to their advantage would be to collaborate with some of the computer scientists who are building these models. And because right now, you don't have to be a good artist to make an AI that's good at art.
Yeah.
You just have to be a good computer scientist. So all they're doing is just taking what they see as art and just gathering a lot of data and then putting it through a mystery box and then outputting something. But if you have someone who understands, who has very specific ideas of what the end result should be, or someone who has the full story, has the context of everything, you might get a very different model in the end. So, and you could absolutely create your own little custom artist AI too. Like if you want, you could put all your paintings into a machine learning program and then just have it output a new painting, and you're like, oh wow,
I never thought about it that way.
I could have made that, but I didn't. Yeah. So, but I could have made that, but I didn't. Is always, I feel something that people say about contemporary art is, like I could have made this, like this thing in the gallery in the museum. Yeah. I could have painted that. It didn't take those. But then you always say to them, like, if you think about why didn't you, right? Because it's because you go and you see these things in museums.
You're absolutely right.
The key is,
I think there's two ways. There's I could have done that, like I never did that because it's so easy. I never thought to do that. But then there's also oh my god, I could have done that, but I never had the idea to do that. Like if you were to put it, like if I put all my paintings into a painting that gives me like this amazing, like breathtaking different perspective to paint a subject a different way, I could be like, I really never thought about this. Is amazing, I'm gonna try that. Versus like, oh, I could have done that. I didn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I could have done that. Yeah. So I think the majority of when I have those thoughts, it's like if someone told me to do this, I could have done that, right? But no one ever tells you how to make art. Yeah. So, and I do you know that one artist who cut the canvas,
who
sliced, and that kind of was like
I forget the name of it, but
yes, but that was sort of breaking through on a barrier, right? Because people never think, oh, this is just a canvas. Like, what can I do with but except for to paint on it.
Instead of create an image, make the canvas itself an art.
And then someone else, but then now we look back on it and we think, oh, if you wanted me to cut through a canvas, I could have cut through a canvas. But no one ever tells you to do stuff like that, right? Yeah. So that's why I think when you think about AI, it's a little silly, because AI is like a little kid that you're just telling to do things similar to this. Yeah. So it's like it's like AI is that one person who says, I could have done this. And then you say, okay, well, here, keep doing more. You gotta hit him, then why didn't you? Go do this. Go do it. But then, like, you're only doing this because someone else is telling you to. Exactly. But people who are making things that you don't see before, who's gonna tell them to?
But yeah, I think like right now, like we're just, what's that expression, like dipping your toes in the water in a way, because there's I don't remember exactly, so I'm not going to give the location, but there's a big well-known gallery in Chelsea that they just did a press review last week, and they use, like, how do you say, chat GPT, yeah, and they used, instead of like having the press communications person do it, it says created by chat GPT, and that was like the talk. Everybody was like, oh my gosh, what is this going to mean? Are they going to represent AI artists? And then even being thrown in space, like anything could happen. Anything. You could go like wherever, Yeah, and part of being creative is making those connections between things that you didn't think were possible. Yeah. And maybe getting those, maybe that frees up a lot of your brain power if someone else can show you all the possibilities for this, for one specific style, and then you think, oh, maybe now that I've seen what's possible, is there something I want to explore? Is there something I want to change in this? Absolutely. I think that could help a lot with art, writer's block, but for the artist block. Artist block. Because so many previous guests that I interviewed, they said they struggle a lot with it, and some of them weren't able to create anything for up to a year. So imagine you're feeling so stuck, you're like, okay, let me try this, and boom, you're just given this on a silver platter in a way, fresh inspiration, creativity, in a perspective you never imagined you could reach. And then you can use that and excel on top of that, and then when you get there, use it again, and then you know what I mean. So you could literally live 20 artists' lifetimes into one in terms of work,
because it does say it's convenient. That we've talked about how convenient digital art is, but if you could skip the entire brainstorming process or the sketching out your ideas process,
the second guessing, because we're humans, that takes a lot, I think, from emotionally and physically as an artist. You could have the beautiful sketch, or if you do the before you paint, or you just start painting, but the second guessing, that's 5-10 minutes every brush stroke, you know what I mean, and you add that up, that's a long time. So it could easily facilitate. We should come out with an app while it's hot. Could you imagine for you know how Art Forum magazine has an art guide app? Yes. Come out with AI app. That's a great. Maybe we shouldn't put it out there so somebody takes it, but that's just a random thought. Direct demographic artist. Yes, yeah.
I was just thinking about NFTs now that we're talking about digital art, because I know it's it seems to be a very controversial type of. It's a very controversial space for art, I think. And I don't. Do you have any opinions on it? Do you want to talk about it?
I think it needs to be. I think there needs to be certain regulations on it. I think you need to know what you're doing, or have somebody that you know what you're doing. If you're the buyer prospect, or if you're an artist and somebody's interested in your NFTs, you need to know the business aspect of it instead of just endlessly creating. So I think. Maybe not having regulations legally through Congress, but knowing the business side, both as a buyer and as an artist, creating the product. But I'm all for it. I love the idea.
The way I see it is, I think a lot of people are just confused. They don't know anything about it, which makes it very scary. Yeah. and it opens up so much room for people
fear.
To be afraid.
And
I would not doubt, like, I don't blame anyone for if they look at it and think, why this is just like why wouldn't I just download this to my computer, right?
Exactly.
And I think that's the ability to download things to your computer and print it out is another modern luxury that we have, which is so beautiful to think about. And because I think if the idea of buying digital art came before the idea of seeing images on the internet, then this would be an entirely different discussion, right? When the internet first came out, you had to make a payment to download images. Can you imagine how? But I think the problem with NFTs right now is one that there's no agreed upon there's no agreed upon marketplace to be like a go-to, right? I think it would be really interesting if like Sotheby's or Christie's, if they had their own marketplace for NFTs, and then that would give it just so much credibility there. And man, I should not be giving them my...
I know, that's what I'm saying. Like, we're having like this, what do you call, like, stream of artistic consciousness.
Yeah.
That who knows who's listening. Just cut us a check and put us on the board.
Yeah. I think the legitimization of NFTs is probably... there's some relationship between the legitimization of NFTs and how much respect is placed on digital art as an ownership of digital art. It's similar to, I think, print in a way, where if you like a painting and you want to get a print of it, you could do that. And it won't be the original painting, it won't be the original art, but it will have the same visuals as the original, that it achieves most of the effect that you get.
Did you do that as a kid? Like, go get prints of art?
I don't think I think I had those posters, right? Because
thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. I'm so happy that we met at the art fair, and now we're here doing a podcast, and it's almost not even a year, so that's pretty cool. So who knows what we're going to be doing next, like AI. Do you mind sharing us your Instagram with us so people can follow you?
Of course. My Instagram is Yiding Pudding, YIDING PUDDING. That's my personal Instagram, so you could follow me and all my art journeys as I go and look at things and maybe collect some things along the way. It's also where you can reach out to me if you have any questions or you want to talk about anything we talked about today.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And if artists wants to reach out to you and set up like an art studio, open studio to have you, it's totally chill, right? Totally
sure. Cool. I love meeting new artists all the time. Yes.
Perfect. Great. Perfect. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Until next time. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Tarik Talk. Follow Tarik Talk on all social media channels and check out the video interviews online.